Okay, we will go ahead and get that. Okay. And we still got 2 minutes, Will, before we start. So that lets the YouTube people get on there on time.
Do you want me to just like kind of follow around, or do you want me to like kind of be interactive? I guess like camera on and unmuted and stuff.
Yeah, you stay on unmuted because we're going to be talking, and then I'll like kind of talk about where we want to look, and maybe you can use your cursor and kind of point it out.
Okay, that's fine.
Okay, and then we'll just switch between the tabs as we get in information. Okay,
All right.
so hey Trey, I want to ask you a question. If you're looking at the screen and you see this stuff, I'm zooming in. Do you see me zooming in? You can unmute and answer. Do you hear me, Trey?
I do. I was trying to unmute you. There we go. Is that better?
Yeah.
Okay, I can see you in the top right, and then I've got a good picture of the calculator.
Okay, so I zoomed in on it. If I zoom out, does it zoom out?
It did not.
Okay. Okay, good to
I
know.
see basically your whole screen, your whole camera or
Okay,
laptop screen.
I got you. Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay. You there, Will?
Yeah.
Okay. Hello, everybody. My name is Dan Jones. I'm with Jones Business Management and Growth Consultants. And today we are going to talk again about pricing for profitability. We have with us Will Egan, who I've been working with for the last couple of months. He has his own landscaping business down in Jacksonville, Florida area, Ponte Verde. Am I saying that right? I lived in Florida for 30 years, and I
Pont
don't know. He's
Pontevedra.
Ponte Vedra. There you go.
Yeah.
Okay. So interesting thing about Jacksonville is it pretty much takes over the entire county of Duval County. It's one of those really big cities, uh, and that seems to be a southern thing. I know Houston takes up 5 counties in Texas, so Jacksonville's the only other city I know that pretty much does that. But that's neither here nor there. So how you doing, Will?
I'm doing pretty good. How you doing today?
Doing good. Thank you. I want to thank you for being willing to kind of open your books a little bit and share with us your journey. So you've been in business 6 months. You were doing about 3 months down in Florida before you and I got in contact, and I started helping you with a little bit of stuff. Our big push has really been your pricing and your marketing, I would say. Uh, would you agree with that?
Yeah, that's right. Just focus on making sure I'm pricing accordingly and figuring out where money's going in the business and figuring out what my time is worth.
Right.
Trying to get that down to a T.
So when you started out, your big concern was, if I recall, being able to pay your bills.
Yeah, because I had a little situation with a vehicle accident, and I was more focused on just trying to get busy so I could afford to eat and stuff like that.
Well, are you eating?
I'm eating pretty good now.
Yeah. Okay. Good. Good. I'm glad to hear that. So, okay. So what we're going to do is we're going to look at a lot of people that are in my free Facebook group, as well as people who follow me on YouTube, are recipients of my original pricing calculus, which was just to explain to people the basics of pricing. In other words, understanding where your overhead is, what your job costs are, and the margins, and setting them so that you could price accurately. What I have done, though, is I have built a more advanced pricing calculator that has a few extra features in it that will allow the user to not only determine what their hourly pricing should be, but to price out lawn jobs And also, they could price out landscaping jobs doing this and then track what their daily profitability is, both their gross margins and their nets based on their overhead, their labor. The labor we'll come back to in just a moment, and their profit margins so that, they know whether or not they're making money. They can know whether or not they're efficient. They can know what their production hours are, because all these things can be data which you use to make yourself more efficient and more profitable. If you find out that you're at a 60% efficiency rating, it's not the end of the world. That's just the beginning, because now hey, I need to get up, to like higher, 80, 85%, and you can set a goal and work towards it and track it and see how you're doing. So we're gonna work through some of this stuff. So the first thing that you do when you come to this calculator, what Will did, is he put in his overhead. Now, uh, Will, I noticed this, and I didn't catch this yesterday when we were talking. Um, you've got in your rent here. That's a portion of your annual rent at the place that you live because you're using a home office, right?
Yeah, it was like a percentage of the biggest square foot room in the house, and that is what I calculate that times 12, and that's how I got that number.
Okay, that's good. That's good. That's detailed. And the same thing with the utilities, a portion of your utilities on that same percentage.
Yeah.
Okay. So he also puts in his liability insurance. Currently he's working, with no work comp, because he hasn't gotten big enough to hire full-time employees. He is paying himself a salary, you'll notice. Okay. He's got office supplies. He's got in here, what he estimates jobber to be for the year, his fuel estimate, equipment repair. Now, I do want to pause for a second and I want to talk a little bit about fuel. It's fine with Will being small that Will puts in his estimated fuel as an overhead cost. Um, it depends, though, as you grow larger, how you account for that. Some fuel will be overhead cost, some will be variable. And once you get larger, you've got to start calculating the variable fuel cost in a different area. With me, when I had my company, since I had, myself and I wasn't out mowing, and I had a supervisor and he wasn't out mowing, and I had a bidder and they weren't out mowing, their fuel was, estimated on how much it was going to be a year. That was carried as overhead. However, the fuel for the maintenance crews and the landscaping crews and the irrigation and the hardscapers was all carried as variable expense, because it, where they would be driving and how much fuel they would be using on different lawns and stuff like that varied. So we would work that into the cost of the job. So, some of your fuel can be overhead expense and some of it can be variable. Will does not need to worry about too much about doing variable right now because he is just a small company. But as he grows larger, this is one of the calculations that he'd want to do. Why
Mhm.
am I telling you that? It's not to make you, Will, feel like, oh my God, I got something else to learn. You don't right now.
Yeah.
Okay. But you want to be aware that as you grow larger, what you're doing is it's building blocks. Okay.
Mhm.
You learn something, you implement it in your business, and it's fine. It gets you through at this point to determine where you're going. And then as you grow larger, you add on to that building block.
Okay. Yeah.
Okay. So you got your fuel in there. You've estimated your equipment repairs. Now, so Will, you came up with a lot of this after you and I'd had uh I don't know. Maybe you thought I was nice. I thought I was a little bit of a dick. I'm like, come on, man, you got to do better on your overhead. I mean, like, pull out all your receipts and go through them
Oh,
because,
yeah. I didn't
you
really
know,
understand what overhead really meant until we broke it down.
right. Yeah, because it was, I mean, Will had come up and he's like, yeah, my overhead is, I can't remember what figure you came up with, but I'm like, good Lord, there's absolutely no way it's that cheap. Have you thought about this? Have you thought about that? So you did, you pulled out receipts and really started looking at it. And then as bills came in that you forgot about, We can see that you've added them here, like your LLC, right?
Mm,
You got your annual renewal for that every year, so you've added that in,
yeah.
right? You want to add this stuff in, folks. And Will, I'll say it to you again. You, as a business, are not paying for anything. Yeah, you're the person paying it, but the customers should be paying it. And so you've got to understand this stuff so that you can pass on the cost. Okay. That's
Yeah.
not being, greedy. I had somebody tell me this yesterday on a video where I was talking about equipment repairs. And they're like, well, charging the customer for all your equipment repairs and equipment replacement. I mean, you can just price yourself out of the market if you're going to be greedy. It's not greedy,
Mm, yeah.
right? That equipment gets wear and tear every time that you use it
Use it.
at a
Yeah.
customer's property. And if the customer had to mow their own lawn, they would have wear and tear on their mower. Well, it's the same thing with you. And the percentage is probably about the same. They might have like a $400 mower and it might last them, 6 years. You've got a $8,000 lawn mower that might, with good care, last you 6 years. The cost to replace it is higher, at $8,000, but per cut probably comes out to the same as, what the other person
Yeah.
paid to replace their stuff. But
Yeah.
you want to account for that. So if we can scroll back up though, it just, you want to put in all your overhead. Then over here, if you can highlight it, the daily production hours. Okay. So Will, daily production hours. Let's see how well you can repeat back this thing that I keep hitting you on. Can you tell me what your daily production hours are? What that means?
Yeah, the daily production hours is the actual hours you're producing money throughout the workday. So if you work, from you get to the shop and you're packing up to when you're getting in your car to leave the shop, those are that's your hours for the day, but how many hours of that day are you actually producing income or revenue? So you got to calculate that by, timing when you're actually working.
Right. Okay. And so initially when you said, well, I hadn't taken care of, I hadn't, you weren't tracking like your times at jobs. I asked you just to guesstimate it,
Yeah.
right? And you came up with a guesstimate and you put it in there. And then as you started tracking time, then you were able to get more accurate. And
Yeah.
you're
A
going to
little
get
better.
more accurate. Yeah. Yeah. Well, you're getting there, right?
Yeah.
So, yeah, folks, you want to estimate how many hours a day you're actually at jobs earning money, whether it's mowing lawns, doing a cleanup, a landscaping installation. If you do hardscaping or you do irrigation work, you don't want to count the time that you're driving between job A and job B. That's not production hours. But the minute that you get at job B until you're done with job B, that's a production hour. You want to track it and you add everything together and you come up with an average. I average X number of hours. Okay. When I started tracking my production and stuff, I remember I was at like 6.48. So just under 6.5 hours on an 8 hour day in production. And I'm like, damn, that's an hour and a half and like a couple of minutes every day that I'm paying for labor where I'm not earning money. Knowing that, though, allowed me to look for ways to increase my production time and cut back on, like, I told people, look, you got 5 minutes to get out of the shop. We organized the way that everything was loaded, so that the guys could just get in the truck, check it, and leave. There was, so we cut down on some time there. We implemented, of course, we got larger. We implemented having fuel on site so people didn't need to go to gas stations because when people would go to gas stations, one guy might be gassing up and the other two might be inside buying chips and snacks for the rest of the day. And, so now, what should be a 5 or 6 minute fuel stop turns into a 20-minute fiasco. But if you know what your production hours are versus your actual hours for the day, and as a percentage, then you can start looking for ways to make it more efficient. And I encourage everybody to do that. If you don't know what they are, guesstimate them, start tracking them, and then start saying, how can I get my production hours up? Your production hours are at what on average right now? And you don't have a full schedule,
Oh,
right? But let's,
mine.
yeah, yours will. But let's just tell everybody this. Remember, Will is still only a couple months in business. He doesn't have a full schedule from Monday through Friday, but he's been filling his skid pretty fast. So his production hours are not going to look as great as somebody that's been in business maybe 3 or 4 years, because he's not necessarily
Oh,
working an 8-hour day when he's mowing. Average production hours working out to now. Do you know? What do you have in here? 4?
oh, mine. You sorry, you
Yeah,
lagged
yeah,
for a minute.
yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think average is between like today and yesterday, and it seems like it's about for an 8 hour day, like 5 hours and
Okay,
30, 40 minutes. That's like,
right. So 5.66.
yeah,
Okay, so put that in for your daily production hours in there, 5.66. Okay. And so weeks of the year that you're in production, you've got 48 because you got about 4 weeks of the year where you really don't need to do much of anything.
yeah,
Like we said, Will's in Florida. Down in Orlando, I did work 52 weeks of the year, but I didn't do that my first couple of years because I didn't have as much business. So Will's smart here. He's figuring out how many weeks of the year does he have to actually earn money to cover his overhead. Okay. And right now we know it's on average 5.66 hours a day, 48 weeks of the year. If we can scroll down a little bit. Okay. Number of production employees, really it's just you,
yeah.
right?
Well,
Yeah.
I think we switched it to two because it was like the way the calculator was because we were trying to calculate that job, the
That
job.
job, yeah, the job that you were doing where you'd hired help. So you can go back and change it if you want. We can keep it at 2. That's
Oh,
fine because we have an average when you do hire out help, of what it
yeah,
costs you. So that brings us to our overhead. We are going to scroll all the way down to the bottom of the overhead for a second because I want to show you something. If you look in the lower left-hand side, you see equipment replacement per year. This is a calculation that'll be brought in from another section it will come to in a moment, but it gets added to the overhead calculation for the year. And so your total is how much there uh, for the
uh,
year?
the, the total for the year is 82, about 82 and a quarter grand.
Okay. So, and that includes your salary that you want to pay yourself, right?
Yes.
So the company's, working to calculate that. So we're going to go from the base calculations. Let's go one page over. No, is that the right one?
What are you looking for? Production
The-
employee cost is the
What,
next one.
what, what was the next one over? I thought it was,
There's hourly rate
yeah,
calculator.
there we go. The
Yes.
hourly rate calculator.
All right.
That was the next one over from the overhead, wasn't it?
No, the next one from the overhead is this one, the employee
Oh,
cost.
okay. Well, then that's what we'll do. Let's do it in order. Look at that. I
Okay.
don't even know my own
All
form.
right.
Got it out of order. Okay, so Will put in when he's working, like he put in a rate for himself, even though he's already paying himself a salary. Um, because Will's goal is to get a maintenance team up and running. So here we want Will to add when he's out working, what the rate is he would pay for like a crew lead and what he'd pay for somebody that's working. Okay. He'd put in the estimated number of hours. He puts in how many hours of vacation he'd be willing to pay somebody for their first year working with them. And then he's got uh his burden as far as percentage of taxes that the employer is responsible for, what the insurance would be, what unemployment is, so on and so forth. So you can see, like, if we look at Will, if he were paying himself, not the salary, but paying himself per hour, or if Will were somebody else, another employee, that
Yeah.
rate of 25 actually comes to $28. How much? I got
29.84.
okay, yeah. Okay, 29.84. You're right. And then that gives him a base hourly rate. And then we've got a base weekly rate. And then from there, we go to the base annual rate. But here's the thing, the actual cost per hour for Will at $25 would be $42.80 that he would have to earn per hour to cover his expenses, just to cover the labor expenses. What does that mean? Well, let's not forget that Will has all these taxes he's got to pay, but he's only doing 5.66 hours of production in an 8 hour day. So during the time he's in production, he's got to cover, folks, you want to do this, you want to cover the hours that you're not in production. Okay. Your employees should be earning that every hour on top of their overhead burden and the profit for the business. If you don't price out this way, you are losing money. Okay. So that 4280 takes into account all of that plus the 20 hours these people aren't working but getting paid for once a year. Okay, so this calculator will tell you all of that. Will, I want you to do two changes for me in here.
Okay.
I want you to give yourself 2 weeks vacation, so 80 hours, change just yours to 80. And you see that Will's rate jumped up. Now, let's put it back at 20. And it goes back to 4280. Now, if you'll go back to the first page and you'll increase your production hours to 7.25, not the, yeah, there you go. And then let's go back and take a look at that. Now, look, if you can get your production hours up, folks, right? The amount of time that you're actually out producing. So, in other words, get your departure times down, get your times at the gas station down, get your route density really, really tight. So you're spending less time driving between jobs. Suddenly we go from 4280 that employee has to cover every hour to 3331. Okay. That's important. It's key. Okay. If you can go back and change that, because we want to be accurate as we move on. So 5.66. Yeah. Great. Thank you. And if we can go back there again, and as you can see here in the lower right-hand corner, what we get is an average hourly labor burden for all operational employees. If Will added 10 other employees here, all at different rates, different vacations, it'll average it out. Because look, when you're bidding a job, folks, you do not want to be, um, saying, oh, well, if I assign this crew to it, it's this amount. If I assign that crew, you just want to say this is what my average labor rate is for now. Understand that as you get to be larger, if you get to the point where you've got hardscaping, you've got irrigation, you've got maintenance, you've got landscaping, I can tell you you're going to pay your irrigation techs more than you pay your maintenance guys. You're going to be paying some of your hardscapers far more than you're paying your irrigation techs or your maintenance guys, right? So at that point, you may need to go ahead and get a little bit more advanced than your averages and say, this is my average for my maintenance guys. This is my average for my hardscaping. If you grow your company that way. But for now, where most of the people that I help are, most of their people are at the same level. There may be varying prices that they're pay rates that they're giving them, but it's all within a group, right? And so we can keep it that way. So, Will, do you have any questions about anything I've said? And
No, I mean, I understand all this, and then, all right, what's like average hours, I guess, for like vacation? I mean, I guess I didn't really read hours. I thought maybe it was days or
right,
something.
yeah, well, 20 days vacation would be really sweet, wouldn't it? I mean, I got 30 in the army, but then again, I was working from 6 in the morning until God knows when. Um, so it depends. I typically would start people out after they got past their 90 days. I'd give them 40 hours a week. I mean, a year, vacation if they were full time. And then after a couple of years, I'd bump them up to 80. And my supervisor had, like 120 and some of my other longer term people. So 3 weeks. But you're starting out. So I mean, 20 hours of, comp time to your people is not Not bad.
Yeah.
It's not bad. But you got to see, what are you comfortable with and what is the market call for? But here's the other thing, right? And you want to understand this. Your employees may not. You're not paying for their vacation, right?
Yeah.
They are by earning the money that they need to be able to cover that,
No, that's right. Yeah.
right? So, I mean, if if you set it at 4 weeks of vacation that you're giving people, you're putting a big burden on your labor for
Yeah.
them to be able to cover all that.
Yeah. Well, I guess a question for like someone smaller or someone who's got a couple employees or looking to get employees soon. What do you do? Like, for example, I like last year, I went bi-weekly in the winter because it doesn't need to be visited every time. But
Right.
if you have a guy on hourly instead of salary, how do you like kind of do that? Especially if you want to keep the person.
Right. If you want to keep the person. So that was a big challenge for me my first couple of years. Eventually, once I got to a point where I had enough contracts, I was able to kind of like have, you know, uh just split things into this was a light week, a heavy week. And guys were okay with, maybe having a 32-hour week and then a 38-hour week in the winter. They kind of liked it,
Mm-hmm.
because I mean, because during the summer you're just beat to shit.
Yeah.
So they like that little bit of breathing room. But the other thing is, honestly, um, sometimes you've got to be able to say to people, look, this is just business, and I'm letting go the people that are the least producing. And the people that are really good, then you structure things in a way that you can keep them employed at a rate, that'll at least suffice through the winter months.
Yeah, because I get they pay this, down here in Florida, they pay the same from January to December because it's warm enough to where there's still some maintenance that needs to go on once in a while. It doesn't like
Right.
just completely doesn't not need to be touched. So I always thought like, I don't know, maybe start someone hourly and see price wise how it goes and then
Yeah.
either switch to salary or like
Well, okay, so
double
look,
for a week or something.
here's the thing. There's very stringent requirements on paying somebody's salary, and every state's different. I can
Mm.
tell you in Florida, if you get caught paying somebody a salary for one of these types of jobs, it's not a protected job. You can do pay for performance type things, making sure that they at least make minimum wage no matter how many hours that they work. But putting somebody on salary for a job like this is kind of out of the norms of what's people do it, but they're not right when they do it. Only certain types of jobs can be considered salary under
Mm.
Florida labor standard laws.
Okay.
You
What do you
with
mean
you with
by
me?
like certain type of jobs? Like,
Supervisors, managers, and certain
uh,
administrative jobs in an office can be salary. Okay. But a job typically where you're out working in the field
mhm.
cannot be salary. Okay.
Oh,
You can do it. You can do pay per performance, right?
yeah.
But you've got to make sure you've really got to be tracking how many hours they have. If they go into overtime, you've got to be able to calculate all that stuff to prove that they at least made minimum wage. Because if somebody comes and complains to you or complains to the state, hey, Will gave me, $900 this week, but I worked, 73 hours, or whatever, and 33 of that was overtime, which is time and a half, right? So now it becomes, like 48, 49 hours on top of 40, 89 hours, suddenly, maybe you're not making minimum wage. And then you get hit with a fine.
Oh yeah,
You
definitely.
you with
That's
me?
yeah.
Right. So yeah, you want to kind of avoid the salary thing. You can look at P for P, um, but right now I would just, stick with the hourly rate and just
Yeah.
make sure that you're accurate tracking the times. Okay.
Yeah, because I got that idea because I mean my buddy's like the crew lead of a landscape and his guy pays him salary.
Yeah.
So
Well, I can tell you that it's not 100% legit
Yeah. All
to
right.
do it that way. I mean, look, if the guy's fine with it, that's fine. I'm not going to rock the boat. But I can just tell you, if you go look at, what it actually says and you talk to an attorney, they're going to tell you no.
I need
Right.
to be
And
by the book. I'm not trying to get sued.
yeah, right. Okay. So let's move to the next page if
All
we
right.
can.
Hourly rate. This one.
Yep. Okay. So now what we've got, now that we have our overhead in, now that we've got our labor in, what we've got is our total overhead for the year. We've got the total operational hours. Okay. So what we know here is because Will's saying he's got two employees, because Will's saying he does 5.6 hours of production a day, because Will says he works, 48 weeks of the year. That means that he has 2,716.8 production hours a year. Okay. So that means that the overhead burden per man hour per each individual is $30.27. Okay. Will, one more time, let's go back over and change it to 7.25 for your production hours. And then let's go back to that page. And now we see that we've dropped by about $7 approximately per hour in overhead. But we also dropped from a price of about 105 down to 82.48. Okay.
Gain
And
like
then the
1,000.
and the, pardon?
We gain like 1,000 production hours too. Over a
Yeah.
thousand.
Yep. Yeah. So everything changes, right? When you do that. So as you improve efficiencies in your business, it becomes easier to get to a figure. Now, let's say that Will's going now and he's able to get customers. Let's put your 5.66 back in again. Okay. Let's say that Will's able to get customers at $105.84, right, per hour that when he bids a job. And he manages to get his company more efficient. Well, that 35% profit margin that he's set here for himself now becomes significantly more because people are still paying him the $105.84 based on the way he bid the job, right?
Mhm.
But his actual overhead, labor burden, and profit margin is at $82 we saw a moment ago. So he's actually making an additional $17 an hour in profit when he's in production.
Yeah.
Okay. This
Yeah.
is why you want to know what your price needs to be, get customers to pay it, and then work on making yourself more efficient so that you increase your profitability. This is what the optimize means. When I tell people grow, right, get new clients, get more revenue, optimize. This is what optimize means. Okay, hey, people are paying me $105.84 in production, right? You're making that when you do landscaping jobs. You're shooting towards that when you're doing your maintenance. You start getting your efficiencies up. Now you're optimizing. Now you're making even more profit. Okay. Now
How
you can
how can you help? Go ahead.
go ahead. Go ahead.
How can you help on price? Let's say like for you example, you were super efficient, so your
Right.
prices were a little lower, but how do you figure out if or I guess to charge more? Let's say this is like $100 a man hour, which I try and charge now. Do I
Right.
just kind of remember that and then work on my efficiency? And even if this drops, try and charge this.
Oh yeah, you're going to keep charging that. Look,
Okay.
if you can get customers, okay. So folks, this is something Will and I talked about a couple of weeks ago, where Will now tracks also how many bids he does, how many he sells, what's his close rate, right?
Mhm.
So your close rate, I think when we calculated it the last time was at 60%.
Yeah, it was like 61% or
Right.
like
Okay.
60% for the month.
That's that's a good close rate. Okay. It's not bad. It means that, some people, you know, were repelled by your price or, whatever. Maybe you had BO that day. Maybe they were repelled by that. Who knows? But whatever it was, 40% of the people, 39% decided they weren't going to deal with you, but 60% of the people did.
Mhm.
Okay. 60% is a good number. I usually was at around 67 to 70% on
Yeah.
my clothes, and I was not cheap.
Yeah. I'm not the
But
cheap guy
no,
either.
you're not, but you got quality, right?
Hmm.
And I bet as your pattern gets better, okay, like I've talked about in the group before, if people have read it, I've done it on videos, always have armed responses, canned responses to common questions. Your pattern gets better, you're able to refine it, answer that objection quickly, and your close rate's going to go up. And it's not going to go up because you're cheap. It's going to go up because people believe in you. They trust you. They see quality, reliability, whatever it is. Okay. But
Hmm.
anyway, you're at 60%, 61% at the $100 that you're charging. Let's say you get efficiencies down where you only really need to charge 82. Still charge that 100 because people are buying it,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
But
That's
now
like the
you do.
market. I mean,
Right. But now you got a basement, right? Now at least hey, I got my efficiencies up. If the market takes a turn and I have to lower my price, this is where I can go.
hmm.
Or if short on money in the winter and I really need work, this is where I can go. Right. I would do that. You were asking earlier, like, how do you keep people employed in the winter and stuff like that? Sometimes, like in January, it'd be so dead. I knew like what my rate was at. I would go to my existing customers and say, you know, I'll do this stuff for X amount of dollars. I'm still making my profit, but it's at a lower price point than what I do during the summer. Because, of course, I can't charge a premium because nobody needs the work. But they jump at the deal because it was such a discount. So
Yeah.
you won't know what your basement is, right? This is my low, 82, but I'm charging 100. But if I'm in a pinch, I can do that 82 for side work or whatever to generate some revenue.
Mhm. Yeah, and that's why it was also like important, I guess, to add that like tracking the jobs you're doing and how long it takes, so then you can like calculate in the future. You use this and they calculate, okay, how long will a pallet of sod take, and then
Yep.
how long will 6 pallets take.
Yep.
You have all
Exactly.
that to track.
Exactly. Yep. And you want to be tracking that stuff. And one of the other people that I mentor, she and I were talking, and I told her, I'm like, you need to track. Like you not working with the crew, but just kind of go there and watch them. How, what time do they start? What time do they stop? So on and so forth. How long does it take them to do this? How long does it take to do that? You don't want to do it every time going out there, but you should every couple of months just do spot checks to see how many linear feet a minute are we edging on average, right? How fast can we weed eat? Because your production rates are not going to match up necessarily with the National Association of Landscaping Professionals. You could be faster or you could be slower. Remember, those are averages. If you train your people, right? Like I had patterns with edging, and my people knew that this is what we do at every single yard. This is the pattern we do because it was the most efficient. So that it didn't matter where they went. They always knew this is where we start edging, this is where we end edging, this is the pattern that we work in. We saw our times jump. I mean, not our times, our linear feet per minute jump just by doing that, both with edging and with weed eating.
Hmm.
Excuse me, had a tickle in my throat. Okay. So I'm going to pause for a minute. I want to see if anybody has any questions up to this point. Um, so we'll start with the Zoom. Trey, did you have anything? Okay.
No, not current.
Okay. Okay. Thank you. And let me just hop over to YouTube and see if there's any questions on there right now. Uh, nope. Okay. Okay. So we are moving on. So Will, if we can go to the next page, please. Okay. This is what I was talking about, the section that you folks want to set up in your business for all the equipment that you have and the replacement schedule. Okay. A mower. Will's mower costs 12 grand. He wants to replace his mower every 3 years. So there's an annual set aside of $4,000. Now, some people might say, "Oh, I've had a mower. It's lasted me 6 years. Oh, I had a mower. It lasted me 8 years." That's great, but you never know what the hell's going to happen. So you should have a realistic, how much does it cost to replace? Also, you're going to grow. So you want to be setting aside some money to buy stuff instead of having to get a loan. And if you can get a loan, great. But if you need a down payment, if you are working the cost of replacement into your pricing and then setting that money aside, okay, it carries as a profit, although you don't want to spend it like profit. Okay. It improves the profitability of your company, and then you're able just to buy stuff. Let's remember, and I don't know how many people understand this. When you buy a piece of equipment, it's not an expense. Okay. It is an asset. You are trading one asset, your cash, for another asset, a piece of equipment or a truck or something. That's not income or expense. Okay. This is trading one asset for another. If you go out and get a loan for a piece of equipment, you have now gotten an asset, your piece of equipment, and taken on a liability, which is a loan. Now, is there an expense associated with that? Yes, your interest. So if you do get a loan, the interest portion of your loan payments needs to be carried as overhead, not the whole monthly payment. Okay. There you would work in, this is another reason why you want to have this replacement cost here, because the portion that you pay towards the loan on the balance is paying down the liability. It's not an expense. Let me explain that. Let's say you had a $10,000 loan. Somebody said you got 10 months to pay it. You're going to have to pay $1,000 a month plus $100 interest. That $100 interest goes towards your overhead. That $1,000 that you pay each month lowers the $10,000 liability. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So anyway, all this stuff here totals up,
Hmm.
and then it gets carried over into the overhead expense. Okay. So he's got, 13,000 set aside every year towards equipment, trucks, everything. And then it gets added into his overhead. Okay.
I got a question
Okay.
for
Go ahead.
this. So I know we talked about that having the annual set aside, having a literal like savings account for the business.
Yeah.
I don't know too much about, because I know if you like make too much money and you don't spend it or pay yourself, they like still kind of come after it. But if you put money like this into a savings account, is that, I guess, safe from being touched because it's a savings account? Like,
Right. Well, no, it's not safe from taxes. This is where, you want to have an accountant like you do,
mhm.
right? So that you say, this is my annual set aside. And before you get to December 31st, right? And I'm not talking December 30th, like December 1st or November 30th. You want to be reaching out to your accountant and going, I've got this as an annual set aside towards equipment, but I don't want to be taxed on it. He's going to tell you what to do with it. Or as soon as you start this and you open the savings account, you tell him, this is what I'm doing, this is why I'm doing it. He's going to help you find a way to be able to shelter it as best as possible so that it's not taxable.
Okay,
Okay.
okay, yeah. So
I am
that's
not an
good.
accountant. Here's what I will tell everybody. Okay. Pay attention on the Facebook group in the next couple of days, because there's two big things that I'm going to be able to help you guys with. One, accounting services and bookkeeping if you need the help. And the other thing is legal counseling, consulting, and advice for your business, to help you guys be able to grow. I am neither an accountant nor am I a lawyer. However, I've got relationships with a couple of the best ones in the nation, and they are going to be helping landscapers here very soon. So just keep an eye on the Facebook group, keep an eye on school. I'll be able to tell you, you know, where you can get the help if you need it. Okay. Um, and you know, I can get you in touch with that too, Will. But that is a very good question that you're thinking about that because it is, you know, it's money that could be taxed if it's not set up right.
Yeah, no, yeah, because especially like the legal side, like when I signed for my LLC for the year and I got the document of like workers documents like minimum wage for Florida and
Yeah, yeah.
labor laws, state and federal. I was looking
Yep.
at that and I was like, oh man.
Uh-huh. Oh yeah. There's all sorts of fun things and you know, and OSHA too. You know, you would think that, you know, a lot of people don't think about
Nope.
it, but you know, as you get bigger, you know, OSHA can start to play a role in your business.
Oh
Okay,
boy.
if we can go to the next page,
All
please.
right. This is
Okay.
on calculator.
So we're going to take a quick look here at what Will's got set up for a bid that he's getting ready to do on a job. There's a few things in here, Will, that I was thinking. This is the property that you were showing me uh in Ponte Vedra. Uh
Yeah, this is the one that I texted you yesterday about.
okay. Okay. Yeah. So this isn't a big property.
Mhm.
But here's the thing. You are not going to mow that thing with your 36-inch mower at 5 miles per hour. You're not going to go that fast because there's a lot of turns and the runs are short. So you got to remember that you're
Yeah.
slowing down, you're turning. I would put this property at 2 miles an hour. So let's change it. So what Will did is he measured out the square footage on this property. Um, and then I penciled this property like I walked it with my cursor, you know, as I was going like, okay, I'm coming off the trailer. Okay, I'm pulling up to the yard. Okay, I'm mowing because I've done it for so many years. I can pretty much tell how long each swipe's going to take, right? And
Yeah.
I came out at about 9 minutes. So this is pretty accurate. The next thing he puts in is the linear feet of edging to perform. This includes everywhere that he edges, the sidewalks, the street, the driveway, beds, you know, hard points in the back or on the side of the yard. I think there was a small hard point in the back. So this is all the linear feet. And Will, he's young and he's fast, and he's clocked it out that he can do 120 feet in a minute for edging on a clean line, right? This is not one of those Bahia yards that are just totally overgrown. Um,
No,
so
yeah.
yeah, so it's taken him about, you know, a little over 1.5 minutes to edge this small property. Um, he can do about, would you figure you got 80 there or 60 for weed eating?
60,
Okay.
60 per minute.
Yeah. So Will's a little faster than me. I typically put myself at 50 and I'm old. But that's because I'm really, really precise. But he's got it at 60. And I think based on looking at the property and again walking it with my cursor, I think your time comes up right. And then we've got his square foot to blow. Now, square footage to blow, what you want to understand is you take your 187 linear feet and multiply that by three because when you're blowing, you step out a couple of feet and then you blow everything that maybe got a mess. So we've got 3 times 187, and then he added in the square footage of the driveway and the square footage of that other hard point in the back, and he came up with about 1,000. You can square feet per minute that you can blow is anywheres from 120 to 416 with a good backpack blower per minute, depending on how strong the backpack blower is, but also the debris. So a good fair measurement at this time of year is about 241, kind of splits the difference. So it would take him about 4 minutes to blow. And then he estimated his load time and unload at the job as 3 minutes. If we can scroll down a little bit, right? You show them at the bottom. So what we've got here is that this job would take, if it's an easy yard, which this one really is, 0.41 of an hour. Now, I want to talk about something else here, folks, okay? Because Will asked a very good question yesterday. He said, if I had 3 people doing this yard, will I do it in less time? You'll do it in less time on the clock, okay? So 0.41 means about 24 minutes, okay? But if he had 3 people doing it, he could probably get this yard done in about 9 minutes. But it's still 0.41 or thereabouts, right? Because you've got 3 people each working, let's say 8.5 minutes. That comes to 25.5 minutes of man hour labor. And that's what this figure is here, 0.41 of man hour labor. Whether you have one employee or three or two, that's about what it's going to come to. Okay. It's
I did
not,
this house in 23 minutes
what's
yesterday.
that?
I did this house in 23 minutes yesterday.
Okay, good. So we showed that the calculator comes out pretty close,
Yeah.
right? Okay. So that's good. We've also got over here on the right, like if you scroll up towards the top. So, well, just let's go back down to the bottom and let me just say this part also. So that's on an easy yard, but a moderate, like let's say it's got a lot of turns and stuff, like a few turns, it increases the rate. And then difficult, this would be a property that, it's got like I always love to tell the story of I bid a yard without really looking at it. I just gave like a base price. I used to do them on the flyers. And I didn't look over into the back of this woman's yard. I stood by the price, but she had like 27 statues to Holy Mary Mother and Jesus and St. Anthony and just all in the backyard. And I was like, holy Christ. I said, this is going to be $27. It was really like a $38 yard. I stood by the price, but after time, I was like, look, Miss So and so, I didn't know what your back looked like, and I shouldn't have done this, and it's really cost me money. I like working with you, but it's really costing me this much. I'm not going to charge you the full rate, but if you're fine, like us splitting the difference. And she was cool with it because she recognized it was a lot of weed eating. So this easy, moderate, or difficult is only to go towards the lawn mowing and edging and weed eating portion. It's not going to affect your bushes and your beds, okay? But then you can put in your bushes and about the average that, but the bush, how long you think the bushes are going to take to do, and it'll give you, the time in hours. And then your spray, if you know, like what your cost of glyphosate is per gallon, what your sprayer rate is. These are some things that you need to know. Okay. And you can tell it by the instructions on it or just look it up on Google for my steel backpack sprayer, this model. What does it do? How many gallons per minute can it do? And then on average, 800 gallons, 800 square feet is covered per gallon. It can be a little lower, a little higher, but that's a good average. And what it'll do is it'll calculate out for you what the cost of your spray is and the time to spray. I would only use this portion here, folks, for your maintenance or if you're spraying a really big area just to calculate it out. And because look, throw in 60 square feet of beds. I think that's what you said this property had.
That was the other one, but I could
Okay,
throw
but let's put it in. Okay, that's a ridiculous, figure there. 32 cents and 0.003. It will add it to your calculator. Let's scroll to the right. But, you're never going to charge somebody just 37 cents to spray something, right? Always have a minimum.
yeah.
But at least it lets you know what you got to cover. So now we're looking at the right. We've got two things over here. You got your base pricing. Okay, so the lawn maintenance is $40.59. And then your bush trimming, he hasn't put anything in. The spraying, 25 cents. That's kind of silly. But let's come down here. What margin do you want on your landscape, on your lawn maintenance?
30% probably. I feel like that's
Okay.
a fair number.
Yep. So set it. And then you're going to bill this per cut or monthly?
Monthly.
Okay. And then are you going to include the bushes?
There's no bushes, but I just have it
Okay.
selected. Yes.
Are you going to include spraying?
Yes.
Okay. Um, you're rating it what? Easy, right? Yep.
Yep.
Okay. And then,
Once a month.
okay. And you're not doing the bushes, so it doesn't really matter.
Yeah.
So now we've got Will's per month price. Okay. Right there. It adds everything together. This is what he needs to charge with his margin based on the time so that he can make his profit. Okay.
Yep.
We're going to go to this last page, Will.
All right.
And
Or
we're
I have a
going
quick
to do
question.
this.
I have a quick
Okay.
question
Go ahead.
for the bushes. you
Yep.
know, let's say I'm given a quote, number of bushes. Does that mean like literally count how many shrubs you gotta cut?
Right. So I've got this in here, because there's a lot of properties that have like, 23, 3 gallon or 7 gallon size, whatever.
Yeah.
How long does it typically take you to do it? Um, so I'll probably like add to that as time goes on and make it a little bit more complex, but
Mhm.
I've got it, as far as like complexity. The way you did it was just fine with that one thing you put in there, one long bush, you put one, and you said it was going to take like
15
15 minutes,
minutes to cut. Yeah.
right? And then it just put in there, 0.25. And so like if you had a property with, like, say, if I burned a hedge running down the left and another one running down the right, and they're both about the same size, you can there too. And if you said the left one's going to take me about half an hour and the right one's about the same, right? So you put two and then 0.5, and it'll tell you it's going to be an hour for doing the bushes. It's going to calculate in your rates and put on your profit margin.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. So
Okay.
you would put point 0.5 and not
Yeah. If it,
25
if
or 30 minutes.
if I'm saying that the left one, just that one long bush, and it's
Yeah.
identical to the right, the one on the left is going to take half an hour, and the one on the right's going to take half an hour. Now it's going to be a full hour's worth of work.
Yeah. So would you put one here though? Is that how the calculator would read it?
You don't need to put anything. Well, yeah, I'd put no, I'd put 0.5. Yeah, I'd put 0.5. Two bushes and
Yeah.
at minutes per bush, 0.5, point or
Two.
minutes per bush, right? So you'd say 30.
Okay. Yeah. So you would put the number. Okay. I just
Yeah.
want to make sure I'm adding up the
Yeah.
calculator correctly.
Yep. Yeah. Okay.
Oh,
Yep. You're right. Okay. If we can go to the right now. So we're going to take a look at today. And folks, if you're looking at this, I don't want you to be sad for Will. He's still new. He's only been in business a couple of months, right? He's got a very short list for today. Yesterday was a little bit better, but what it does is we're going to start at the top, and he's got in employees on crew, one. He started work. That means when he got to, it walked out of his place and started loading up and ready to go, 7:38. He's got everything loaded up. He just needs to start his truck and leave. He finished at 4:04. That means when he got home. Okay, so his day was 8 hours and 26 minutes. He purchased $63 in fuel, and he had nothing extra for his jobs that day, right? No extra expenses. But he could put them in there like, during the fall. Hey, I bought, $50 worth of lawn bags or whatever. You can just go ahead and put that in. So if we can scroll back a little bit more to the left there, Will. Oh, never mind. Yeah.
oh,
Um, so every job that he did, he put down the price. Okay. He put down the price for that job per visit, not the monthly price. He put what time he arrived, what time he left, what was his production time on job. That first job was 27 minutes. What was his labor? $17.34. That labor is calculated based on the number of employees that he had on the job. Well, let's change your number of employees to two for a minute. No, up here at the
oh,
top. Yeah, right there. Yep. Okay, and then come out. And now you see, oh, now the job's not very profitable because he only made, he had to spend 34.67 on labor. Let's put it back to one. Okay. So what is this? Okay. So Will's got a mixture of jobs that he was originally bid out when he first started, and then jobs since he and I started working together. Um, some of the stuff he originally bid had pretty good pricing on it. Some of the stuff since we've worked together has actually gotten better. Like yesterday's figures, which I'll share in a moment, you'll be able to see a stark difference between some of his older stuff. Um, but this is going to allow me, just looking at this, like what jobs maybe your pricing is very, very good at. And it'll let you know, like maybe I need to track this job consistently over a several week period and see, because, like it could have been, you could have had a bad day of your time. But if it's consistently like this second job where you're billing out at 34.80, but you're only and you're costing 26.97, that's not a good margin, right? And so it lets you know where you need to improve stuff. Okay.
Yeah.
So we've got all his start and stop times for all the different jobs that he did. And then if we look over here on the right, and Will, can you scroll it over to the profit and loss? And this is where I don't want you guys to be sad for Will right now. Um, he only made $356.80, but like we said, he's starting out, and this is a light day. Okay. His labor is high because his gross margin's only 16.12. But this shows what his cost of good. What's the labor costing to do the work? Not the labor for the whole day. This is just the labor to do the work. You guys want to understand that. Whether you're doing a landscaping job, a lawn maintenance job, you're doing hardscaping, whatever it is, the cost to do the job should be separated out from the cost to run the business. So, because we carry his non-production labor down here, but his production labor, it's really high right now. Okay. His gross profit, not very good. Can you stop sharing your screen and I'm going to share mine, Will? Okay. Bear with me a second. Okay. And we're going to go. Okay, folks. And hopefully we can take a look at this. This was yesterday's daily profit and loss for Will, and it's a little bit better. Let's look at this first job on the left. Um, the $48.49. His labor was $20.58. He had another job for 90. The labor was 24.81. But the fourth job, this is a really old job. It's like one of the first ones you ever picked up, right? When you
Yeah.
first started out, that $23. Okay, this is like warning flags for people. $17.55 in labor to generate $23. Not good, right? And Will recognizes that. And I had talked about it. But he's got options as far as like I think you said this is the mother of a friend or the grandmother of a
Yeah,
friend or
it's like
something. Is that correct?
grandpa's neighbor's daughter. It was like my second house I ever picked up.
Okay. Sometimes, folks, you know what? You keep a property that maybe isn't profitable just because it's a family connection or it's goodwill, good for the business. That's a decision Will can make in the future. But he needs to know what it's costing him. What's his goodwill costing him? And then try and make up for it in the rest. So again, this is his heavier day and he's still new. He did 426.87 in sales. His labor was 204. His gross margin, look here, is 52.08%. That's better, okay, than what he'd had today. As he does a couple of key things that he and I were talking about, he's going to shift his schedule to get all six of the properties that are in the same neighborhood on the same week, which is going to increase his route density and raise his margins. You can look and figure out how to do these things. His non-production labor was 74.43, so that's his time driving to the jobs. That's time, doing whatever else, not in production. And then this is the portion that one employee would be responsible for in overhead on a given day. If it were a full 8-hour day, right? Or based on the 5.5. You know what, Will? Let's go back all the way and change your production hours one more time. Oh no, you know what? It's on my screen. We can't look at yours. Never
Uh,
mind. I was going to say because it'll change what the overhead burden is.
yeah.
So if you get your production up, your overhead burden comes down. So Will was discouraged yesterday. He's like, I did all that work and I thought I was doing great and I lost $23.46. Will did not lose $23.46 because we are having Will track his wages and his overhead salary. But this lets him know that if he hires an employee, he's not ready to hire an employee yet. He's not ready to hire an employee because when he's out doing the work of an employee, on paper, it looks like he's still losing money. Will is ready to hire an employee when he can get this daily net profit into a positive number, and I'm not talking plus 1 cent, right? Into a real profitable number. Okay. But then
Uh,
below that, what we've got is the production hours in the day. So if you look at the top, his day was 7 hours and 41 minutes. You come down here to the production hours for today, it was 5 hours and 38 minutes. His efficient Will is going to take this figure every day that he puts stuff in. He's going to keep track of this on a piece of paper or a board or another spreadsheet, and he's going to average this stuff together every week. What was my efficiency rating for the whole week? And then the next week, he's going to try and improve it, and he's going to track it, and he's
mhm.
going to add it to the average of the previous week and that week that he's in. And he's going to see, did he come up, right? Did he improve it? And so he's just going to continuously, that he's going to use this as a key performance indicator. How efficient am I? Okay. And that's something that you too can do, folks.
Yeah, you'll be
Okay.
surprised. You'll be surprised when you track every little thing, and you'll be like, oh, I didn't even think of that or realize that until you see it on paper. When you see it on paper, it's a whole different game.
Right. And but there's everything, right, that you need to be tracking on paper, or
Yeah,
tracking somewhere that you and I have talked about, um, regularly, like your close rate on jobs, right?
yeah,
Because remember how like down in the dumps you felt because somebody, you'd bid a big job and you're like, oh, they turned me down, and I'm like, well, let's go back and look at how many people you did. Suddenly, you felt a lot better, right?
yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Okay, folks. So I'm gonna one more time see if anybody has any questions. I'll give it a second before we close up.
Dan, where can we get a hold of this calculator, or do I need to get with you privately?
Okay. So Trey, I am going to share that when this is done. People that are viewing on YouTube, because YouTube won't let me put a link into the comment section while I'm live to prevent spam and probably porn, which is a good thing. So I can't put it in there, and if I put it here in the chat with us, then as soon as the chat closes, you won't have it. So I will post this to the group either tonight or tomorrow morning, and the calculator will be in there along with links to a couple of other helpful things like some of my past articles talking about this.
We got a private message too.
Okay. Okay. Will, you got anything else before we wrap up?
No, I think that's about it. Thank
Okay.
you again for
Yep.
helping me walk through
So
some stuff.
So, folks, I do want to remind you, this calculator is available. I'll have the link. It is in the group now, but I'll also put it in the link for the video. If you're watching this and you are not in my group, there's a free Facebook group called the Landscaping Business Growth Hub. You can find it, apply to join, and I'd be more than happy to let you in. If you're looking for more advanced tools, there's the school community. I have classes in there discussing a wide range of topics from my 20 plus years in landscaping and hardscaping business. And if you're ready to grow your business and get to the next step, if you're feeling like you're overwhelmed and just spinning your wheels, I do offer one-on-one mentorship. I have it at two different levels, where I meet with you personally, like I talk with Will, go over individual things, come up with a plan, a course of action to help you achieve your goals. You can definitely sign up for that in the group, and there will be a link on the YouTube video also. So thank you very much. Everybody that is in the group, let's see you on Friday for the landscaping huddle. Let's talk about our weeks, our successes, and our troubles. And thank you very much for your time, everybody. Thank you, Will, for
All right,
really
no
being
problem.
so
Yeah.
so willing to be open. A lot of people wouldn't do that, so that's really big and cool of you. And I want to tell you something. I love working with you because you are so passionate. So
Mhm.
you're passionate, like you're bummed out if you have a bad day, and then if I point out like the success that you have, you just like buoy right back, and you care. You care, when you're talking about like how to help your customers with landscaping jobs and things like that. It's really just, you make me feel young again.
Yeah, no problem.
That
So
that
I'm
that
glad
I
I
hope that
have
didn't sound
someone.
corny, but it's
No, yeah, I'm
you
glad I have someone like you to help me like get, I mean, there's so many things I would have never thought about that are involved in running a business, if I didn't meet you in the Facebook
well,
groups.
guess what? There's more to come, more to
Oh
come.
no.
Okay, have a good night. I'll
All right,
talk to
you
you
too,
tomorrow,
man.
and everybody else, you